Hi, hello. Welcome to today's session on using Lucid to support science. We have a couple different things that we're going to go over today. It's a nice small group, as you can see, so feel free to ask me any questions in the chat or in the just coming off mute and asking me. But first, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure the chat is available for everyone as you're coming in. Okay, so getting started here, you can see we're going to be talking all about Lucid in science. If you are specifically coming as a Canvas teacher, please let me know in the chat, and then I will make sure to review all things related to Canvas at the end as well. So we're going to kick it off by not hearing from me, but hearing directly from two instructors that actually used Lucid with students in their classrooms. So in this first one, Zach is going to share how he used it when his students were researching and compiling all of the facts and information they were learning when they were studying outer space. So without further ado, let's hear from Zach.
I'm Zach Wilhoit. I'm a science teacher at Shortline Middle School in Wetzel County, West Virginia, and I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science. So how I used it last year, I tried to take concepts that kind of follow flows or cycles. I essentially just provided the kids with vocab words, and they had to do online research to see what the vocabulary words meant and where they kind of fit into the cycle. And then they would ask me questions to kind of guide them through if they got confused. I started them off individually and then saw how that went. And as they kind of started to struggle a little bit, and when they kind of started to get frustrated, then I combined them into groups to work together. And that alleviated some stress, and they got a little bit further. And I was just kind of there to guide them through the process and make sure that nobody was having fundamental misconceptions and big mistakes. But for the most part, they guided themselves through the activity I planned out for them. I provided them a NASA website that they had to search through to get facts about each of the planets. I combined them in pairs at first, just to kind of collaborate on how to design it. There were a lot of different designs. People use more arrows, less arrows, more of like a flow versus some people use it more of like a poster board. So that was kind of neat seeing the variations. We essentially just used that NASA website to pull facts, and then just as a class got up and presented everyone's planet and facts about it, pictures. Again, it kind of took like a pretty typical in-class activity of doing that. You know, you just pull facts about the planets and go through them in some manner, but it just kind of streamlined it really nicely, in my opinion. And the kids really enjoyed using Lucid to do it as well, because like I said, it's so easy that they can spend more time being creative and less time worrying about how they're going to do it. I personally found Lucid to be extremely simple and just very streamlined. I mean, you drag a box, you add text, you add an arrow. You can add pictures right there. You know, I could have students working together on opposite sides of the room where they can't talk to each other, but they have to, you know, type to communicate with one another. Because as they get older, they might not be working with someone that they can just talk to. And the fact that everything, it's like an endless board as well. So, you know, if we really wanted to, we could have the entire class's water cycles all on the same board to move around to each person's as a class afterwards and discuss, you know, the positives and negatives to each one. I mean, there's just like endless things you could do with it. I just think it's like a super simple, easy way to get kids to work together that they enjoy doing. You can have the entire class working on one. You can have individual. It's anything you want to make it. That's why I like it. I'm definitely going to incorporate it a whole lot more this year. That's for sure.
Okay, so that is how Zach used it. And this one is the water cycle example where we're walking through how to do the water cycle. So let's go ahead and take a look and kind of dig a little bit deeper into that component. Now we're going to take a look at how Zach's students were able to quickly and easily create a water cycle using Lucid Chart. They started in their Lucid for Education dashboard. They used the plus new button to create a new Lucid chart document. And then from within Lucid Chart, they were able to use the toolbar on the left-hand side to drag out text boxes, shapes, and search for images using the magnifying glass in the upper left-hand corner. Clicking on images, and then dragging out either images or icons onto the screen. Now, in order to connect these to make a quick and easy to understand water cycle, they would hover around and click on any of these red dots, and they can use this to connect from one item to another. This shortcut makes it easy to connect and create that water cycle. You can also drag out from an item, and it'll give you a shortcut menu where you can select from any of the already used icons or select a new one from the shortcut menu. So using these red dots, it makes it very easy to quickly create that water cycle example or any other concept map or cycle that you're trying to create. Then the student can share this and turn it in using that share button in the upper right-hand corner. And then they can make sure that they're sharing either edit access, comment, or view access to their teacher. They copy the link, and then they could post that and turn it into an assignment in any learning management system, Schoology, Google Classroom, or Canvas. Now, as we mentioned, there's also a Canvas integration that allows you to push out assignments. So each student would get their own copy, and then they can turn it in automatically through Canvas, as well as inside of Lucid Chart, there is a Google Classroom icon in the upper right-hand corner of any Lucid Chart document. So if you create a template, you can click that Lucid Chart icon and it will push it out automatically. Each student gets their own copy of your template. They work on it and they can turn it in to be graded through Google Classroom. So you can always use link sharing for students to turn in their work to you, or you can utilize the Canvas and Google Classroom integrations. Okay, next up, we have an example of how instructor used it for creating food webs with their students. So we actually have this one as a template that you can use. And so when you click on the icon, and it will open up that template. And if you search our template library in Lucid and just search food webs, you will get this template inside of Lucid Chart. And then you'll see here, it gives them an example of a different food web in an ecosystem. And then when it has some follow-up questions, how many possible food chains are shown in this food web? So as a class, you can discuss this. You can kind of use it as an intro or guide into a discussion related to food webs. And then students can either create their own from scratch, or they can use a template. So for this one, they have just an example where they have a shape in here. They have some lines already connected. So the students can easily just come in here and they could write the animal's name. So let's say we're doing a food web for Antarctica. So for example, maybe we have fish coming in here, and the students could research a specific fish. They can use the image search on the left-hand side to search for either a specific fish from that food web or just a fish. Drag that fish onto the canvas to put it in the section. And then we will come, so the fish is at the bottom of the food chain. So what I am going to do here, though, is since I started at the bottom, I'm going to click here and I'm going to swap my line with my swap line endings. And so now I'm going to come to what eats the fish. And so when we come into eating the fish, we might have a seal or a penguin eating the fish. So I'm going to write seal. And then again, I might look for a seal in my image search, drag that seal onto the canvas, resize him, and put it right above. my seal. And then again, the seal was eating the fish. So I'm going to swap my line again using the handy dandy swap line in my toolbar. And what eats fish? We have orcas would eat a seal. So then I could look up an orca and I can drag this onto the canvas. So again, students can be working on this by themselves, or students can be working on this together as a group where either you have sent the group a share link to their board or the students they create from scratch their own document and they use the share link to share it out with their fellow group members. Or some instructors will right click on the tab at the bottom for the template and they will hit duplicate, right click, duplicate. So they have the template on multiple tabs at the bottom. And then they might come down here and say, this is going to be group one, and you are going to be working on the savannah. Then tab two is group number two, and they're going to be working on the Arctic, etc. So then everybody, the instructor will share out the share link to the entire class by turning on the share link, giving them edit permissions, and just copying and pasting this out, giving it to students, or utilizing the kebab in the share box. You can also enable a join ID, and this will add a join ID students could use to access this same board as well if you don't have easy way to get a link to them. And so now each student can come into the same board. They can choose the tab that is for their group. They're all working on different environments, and then they can share that. Each of them can present their specific habitat and their ecosystems within it to the entire class at the end. So that's a couple examples and a couple how-to for getting started with creating food webs. And like I mentioned, if you are in Lucid and you go down to your templates, and from your templates, if you just search food webs, you will get the template that I just mentioned. So you can open it up, you can change it, you can delete it, delete pieces, you can update pieces, you can do all of that. So just look inside the Lucid templates for food web and you'll get access to exactly what I just showed you. All right, moving on to our next example. So we have an example of a butterfly life cycle. So we did this a lot in first grade. You can do butterfly life cycles, frog life cycles, lots of different life cycles. We do have a template. There's a couple different ways you can do this. This template, if you open it up, will give you a example for creating your life cycle. So this is a sample. Now, what some instructors will do is they'll actually take out the pieces from this. And so they will say, I want you to label each of the life cycles. So they'll put here and write add label, and the students will be adding the label. And instead of having them there, they're labeling each set of the life cycle. Some instructors have the butterfly life cycle, and then they have students making their own for like a frog life cycle or a different life cycle, a dragonfly, etc. over here. And then they can use the pen tool to draw the pictures of the life cycle. They can use the images to find pictures for each of the life cycle, and then they can draw and create it on their own. And then some instructors will actually have each of the pieces and students will drag it. So for example, they might search in images for a frog, and then we'll pull a frog onto the canvas. So here is a frog, and we have a tree frog here. So then I might look up tree frog eggs, pull the eggs onto the canvas, etc. And then the instructor will have those off to the side in the incorrect order. So they'll have them all mixed up. And then they will have the lines drawn for the students. And then the students are just dragging them into each section. So you have an arrow, and then you'd have your part, another arrow with another part, another arrow with another part. And then if you want to give them even more specifics, you can drag out an empty box to put here so the student knows I fill something in here, then I can copy and paste. I add something here, copy and paste. I add something here, and you can move all of these pieces around. So then the students, when they get their own copy of this, they can drag out the eggs into the correct section, the frog into the correct section, and then they can share that back in with the instructor. So that would be more of a drag and drop type of activity. Now you'll notice when I drag this under, it went behind. So what I'll usually do is make sure to highlight all of your images, do a right click, and go to arrange, bring to front, because everything will be layered on your board by when you add it. So just in case you added your images at the beginning, just make sure to test that they are in front of your shapes. And then one other tip I usually give is I will highlight each of these, and you'll notice from the toolbar there is a lock. So I will always go in and lock this part so that the students aren't accidentally moving, deleting, or changing your boxes and your arrows. But they can still drag the eggs on top of each of the sections. And same thing, you could have the labels already on the canvas so the students can then drag the frog label to the frog, the eggs label to eggs, and they can complete this activity. Now, these are kind of building a couple different ways inside of Lucid Spark. There is one other way. It's called a visual activity, and we have a couple life cycles already in the life set in our visual activities created, but you can create your own for these as well. When you click on the rocket ship, it'll give you a variety of standard type activities. And if you go into more categories and go to the K-12 section, you will notice that there's a variety of activities that you can explore, but specifically since we are talking about science, you'll notice there's a diagram of a plant that's drag and drop, and here's that butterfly life cycle. So I can click add to the board. This butterfly life cycle is already started, and this one works a little bit differently. So for these, the students are dragging components. They have access to the toolbar to build. For your visual activities, all of the activities in the rocket ship, these are drag and drop. And what's really cool about them is you can share out, especially to younger kids, this share link. And I usually change it to anyone with the link just in case they have any issues logging in. They can do it whether they log in or not. You can copy this link, and then I'll go into an incognito window so you'll see the difference, why it's great for younger kids. When students click on this link, they get access to this activity, but you'll see there's no toolbar on the left. So they're not actually dragging sticky notes out, dragging shapes out. They don't have full access to the board. All they do is click start as guest. You can have them log in if your students are familiar with logging in. So they start, and then they just drag each of the items into the correct order. So they start off as a caterpillar, then it moves on and starts to build a chrysalis, and then a cocoon, and then the butterfly, and then the adult merges. And the students, they all get when they click start, they all go into their own version, and then they click submit. And you'll notice there's a view results. So you and the students can click here and you'll start to see an average of where everybody is putting each of these steps, as well as a breakdown of, what should come first, the caterpillar. It'll list all of the bubbles. And so it gives you a nice quick overview of where everybody's understanding is. And just remember that these are just drag and drop, and they provide data. So this is why these are a little bit different. You share out a link, They each complete their own version, and then you can click on view results and actually very quickly compile an average to see what the students are doing. And one last time, if you want to do any of these, they are inside the rocket ship. We have some that are pre-made, like I mentioned, where we have the caterpillar life cycle, we have a diagram of a plant. So you can work on the pre-made ones, or let's say if we add the diagram of this butterfly life cycle, and I don't want it to be butterflies for this time, I can hit edit activity in the upper right hand corner. I'm going to change it to be a frog life cycle. And then you'll notice I can change the title to be Frog Life Cycle. And then I'm just going to come in here and delete each of these. I don't need these. And instead, I will use my image search and search again for my tree frog eggs. So here is my tree frog eggs. And then I can right click if I want to and crop that so it'll fit nicely into a square. Or you can leave it as is and just make it smaller. It all depends on how perfectionist you are. And then again, I can look up the tadpole, tree frog, tadpole. Okay, and then I'll drag the little tadpole onto the canvas. And again, I can crop by right-clicking and selecting crop if I want them all to kind of be a similar square shape. And then you could also add labels so they can drag the labels. So this would be adult frog. I can double click on it and make sure that it's bigger so the students can easily see it, so they can have adult frog. And I can copy and paste and do tadpole, etc. Now, while you're setting this up, the whole way that these function is you'll notice that there's a hand in the upper right hand corner. Everything that's gray will be static. It'll not be able to be draggable. And if I want these to be draggable, I simply click on it and select the hand in the upper right hand corner. And that will now make all of these into draggable components on the canvas. So when the students come in here, you'll have a preview button where you can test it. So the students, this is what they will see, and they can drag the eggs out. They can drag the labels out onto the canvas. So you can test it with that preview button, make sure everything's working, and then go ahead and hit Save Changes. And again, you can use this share link and students can get into just this activity. If you want to add this activity to a board with other activities, like maybe they're building it, then we're also doing this. Just make sure to lock this on the canvas so edit activity will disappear. So I'll click lock. You'll notice it goes away so students can't delete your activity or change your activity. So if they're coming into your board to complete it and you're not using the share link to the single activity, make sure to lock it. So those are a couple ways that you could explore butterfly life cycles, diagrams, different things like that. We also have a template for a space activity. Again, if you look up in Lucid for solar system, so here I am in my Lucid dashboard, I click on templates. If I look for solar system, you will get this template and you can open up either activity. Just click the use button and you'll get your own copy to work with. And so for this one, you can push this directly out using the Google Classroom icon you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, or by pushing it out as an assignment inside of Canvas, or simply sharing a view-only link. If you don't have either of those, you can share a view-only link so students can't change anything. So you copy this, and then all your students need to do is click the 3 lines, make a copy. They'll get their own copy of that activity, and then they can turn it back into you with the share button. And so again, for this one, the students will drag out for each layer. They can drag out the spaceship. They will drag out the planet onto which section they should be on, and then they can also drag in the label to label each of them as well. You'll also notice that this one doesn't only have solar system examples. At the bottom, there's the solar system key. So showing you, it doesn't have to look exactly like this, but obviously you can see which line each of these planets are supposed to be on. And so if you don't want students to see this, make sure to right click on the key and delete that tab before sending it out to students. And then there's also an example of a plant cell if you want students labeling a plant cell as well. And again, if you don't want the plant cell, just right click on it and delete that tab before you send this out to your students. Okay, now this next example actually came from students starting from scratch. So for this example, the teacher said, hey, go into Lucid, open up a blank document, share that document with your group. This was, I think, a fourth grade class. So each group was at their own table, and they were all using all of the shapes inside of Lucid Spark. And you can always switch into Lucid Chart to get more shapes. So they were dragging out all of the shapes onto the canvas. They were moving them around. They were changing the color of each of the shapes. And they actually built and labeled their own volcano from scratch. So when we think about really upping that depth of knowledge, this is an excellent activity and an excellent way to do that. Really get their critical thinking, really having them thinking deeply about the content they are learning, since they're actually building that diagram, not just labeling it. So this is a really powerful activity, and it's great for teachers because all you say is go into Lucid, open a document, and get started. So very low effort for the teacher to get this set up and high educational value from the students who are completing it, since they really have to dig in to create that activity. Okay, and then this last example is thinking more about process mapping. So just in general, in science, there are a ton of different processes or processes. I never know which one. And so just the way that Lucid Chart works. So this is talking about and labeling cellular respiration in a concept map. So anytime students are trying to map out complex concepts, Lucid Chart is a really great way to visualize that. So instead of just reading about it, they can drag out shapes from the left-hand side. And just like you saw, using the blue dots, you can click and drag out to get a line. And then you can add another shape as you're going. And you can quickly create any of these concept maps. And then what I really like is, even to make it more clear, you could also add images to really solidify that even further. So let's look up, I'm not sure what we'll get because I'm not familiar with cell respiration, but let's look up cell cytosol. So they could look that up, and then they could drag any of the images that are correctly identifying. We'll just pretend it's this one because, again, I don't know what I'm doing for cell respiration, but they can drag the images onto the canvas, and they can add those onto each of the sections. Now, again, students can start from scratch on an activity like this, or what some instructors will do is they'll start from scratch, but the teacher will project a blank Lucid document on the board. Each student has opened their own laptop, and we're kind of talking through the process and building it together. So the teacher can actually model, and we're kind of building it together. So rather than just watching, because they're a part of the discussion, the build process, then they're getting a better academic value from that activity. Some instructors will do a fill in the blank where they might have a word bank off to the side. So it says word bank. And then they just list all of the words. So they just have the words up in a word bank. And then all of these just say text, text, text. And then the students are just going in and filling in the blank. So they'll send this template out to each of their students, either using, again, the Google Classroom integration or the Canvas integration. Each student gets their own copy. They use the word bank to fill in the blanks, and then they can turn it back into the teacher. And then other professors will have the diagram completed, and they'll have the shapes empty on the canvas, and they'll have the actual completed ones listed off to the side. And then what the students will do, I mean, this will just be blank. Then the students are just dragging each of these components to the correct location. So they're not building it from scratch. They're not filling in the blank, but they can drag these in and kind of a different way rather than doing a fill in the blank, similar way to do it, but in a drag and drop component. Um, or lastly, you can give them a word bank and an empty page, and they have to make sure that they incorporate all of the words in the word bank into a process map that they are doing starting from scratch all by themselves. So that's kind of what I love about Lucid is you can have different layers of difficulty. So you could even do that and differentiate with your students where one group of students is doing the drag element, one group of students is doing the fill in the blank, one group of students is just getting a word bank with an empty page, and then they're working on doing that either independently or in groups. Okay, so those were a bunch of different ways that you can utilize Lucid for science. Now, one last thing, if you go to lucidforeducation.com, all words, and you go up to the K-12 section, and you come over to templates from the list that pops up, you'll notice there is a science diagramming toolkit and a science toolkit, and both of these toolkits have a variety of some of the things we've shown plus more of different diagrams, different templates that you can use to help get started with your students. So again, go to lucidforeducation.com, all words. Click on K-12 up, we'll hover over K-12 and then come over to the templates section that is right at the top of your resources. And then you'll have a ton of different tools as well, organized by content area. I hope this helps you as you're getting started using Lucid to support science. And again, if you're interested in learning more about Canvas and the Google Classroom integration, if you go to the Lucid for Education, if you just search YouTube for Lucid Canvas integration or Lucid Google Classroom integration, you'll find all our videos, or you can also search again from that Lucid for Education page. If you hover over K-12 and come to videos, this will bring you to our YouTube page, which has all of our Canvas resources, and your Google Classroom resources are right down here in the integrations playlist. So I hope this helps you get started, and reach out anytime if you need any help.